Okay, thanks for joining us. Welcome to our session, Agencies for Change. As you can see, any spare change will do. These guys are all taking offers. I'm Wes Wood, creative at the BBC, for BBC Creative, and I'm joined by a brilliant lineup of esteemed colleagues and friends within our sector. We're talking about creative agencies, obviously, as the name suggests, and animation productions and companies producing animation. Where does this work come from? And how we can encourage these successful relationships, pay the bills, make outstanding creative, and also what do we need to change the way in which we're thinking to make this work. But before we kick off, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the sector. So thank you for joining us today. I myself have worked on both sides of the panel. For many years I was in animation production, working with McKinnon Saunders and Cosgrove Hall Films, before a 10-year stint as a producer at CITV and later ITV Creative, which was the ITV's creative agency, if you will, launching projects such as Thunderbirds and creating bespoke animated content and shorts. From there, I joined the incredible and fairly recent team at BBC Creative North, the BBC's in-house creative agency Northern Division at Salford, and I work across kids, sport and charities, and having worked on creative projects such as Go Jetters, the NFL, and Children in Lead most recently. So it's no secret that animation is a visual language that is extremely emotive, and its popularity as an art form creates content that is now the most popular way to communicate with audiences across the planet. That's a fact I've just made up, but you can have it. So from GIFs to apps to click-throughs and ads, animation is a language of love, lust, passion, dreams, and wishes. It makes us laugh and share with friends. It makes us cry when we are least expecting it. And it tells us when to watch now, spend now, or do something before the world ends and all the shops shut for one day of the year. And if you don't stock up now, you're all going to die. So, this year, without exception, Christmas has brought a flurry of animated presents. As we all know, Colin the Carrot, he's back. He's successfully stolen the Coca-Cola truck, if you've not seen it by now. He joyrides around some mountains before leaving us on this very Italian job cliffhanger. And Coca-Cola taking the Twitterverse by storm, supporting the plagiarism. And if you've had the pleasure of watching the banned Iceland political animated film about oil plants, the palm plants, there we go, and saving the orangutans, then obviously you should. It's causing quite a stir on social, and it's all over the internet right now. So, without further ado, I'm going to hop over there, and we're going to do a brief introduction to our panelists. Give them a round of applause. So first and foremost, I'd like to introduce Tom. Tom's from Blue Zoo, as you probably all know, and he has been working within our sector both in animation production and agency work for as long as I can remember. And you've got something to show us.
Yes. Blue Zoo, been going for 18 years now, and we do about 3/4 of the work is long-form kids TV, and about 1/4 of the work is commercials. And so we've brought one of our commercials today, which we recently made for Nickelodeon in the States. It's actually a commercial for sweets. Can't do that in this country anymore. Thought we'd bring it along for nostalgia.
Just before we jump into that, sorry Tom to interrupt, I think it's really interesting, especially for all us out there, that your animation production company wasn't established just on long format animation. It was established on across both disciplines, which was the creative work for short form content and long form. Was that intentional when you set up?
Well, when we set up, we'd, like most startups, we'd kind of take any work if anyone would give us. And we kind of, fell into doing more of the children's stuff as well, because it was very fortunate when we started back in 2000. It was just when digital TV was starting in the UK. So our very first client was BBC, and they said, "We've got these new channels starting. Would you make some animations?" And that was for the launch of CBeebies. So,
right.
And whilst we're doing that, we're also doing lots of small projects, as all small studios do. So from the get-go, we were kind of balancing the long form and short form, and it really helps. kind of with the ups and downs of both of those.
Okay, well, I think we're going to delve slightly deeper into that a little bit later on. Well, you got something to show us today?
Sure. So this is an advert we made for Tops, and I think we had about 5 weeks to make it. Are we talking about it after, or shall we?
Let's go. Let's do it now.
First.
The tale of Ring Pop Gummy Gems.
Sweet gummy! Sour gel! Gummy, gummy, gummy! Gel, gel, gel! Gummy, gel! Gummy, gel! Gummy, gel!
A gummy and a gel? Sweet! Ring Pop Gummy Gems, the sweet gummy with a splash of sour gel on the inside. In 4 delicious 2-in-1 flavors.
What I find fascinating about that, and we touched on this just off stage before, was that you run a company that not only comes up with great creative, but you hand that creative to the staff and to the team, and you encourage them effectively to come up with brand new ideas to kind of inspire and create new styles and languages within animation?
Yeah, so we run our short films program. So twice a year we'll give a very short brief out to everyone in our studio. Then everyone, no matter what department they work in, can pitch to direct the short and come up with an idea. Then everyone votes on their favourite, and that goes into production. And we always try and kind of push out of doing new stuff we haven't done before. And we did one a few years ago called More Stuff, which was about elves being annoyed at the commercialization of Christmas, and it was kind of Disney musical style thing. And we showed that to Nickelodeon, they loved it, so that advert's kind of off the back of the short films. So it's nice to be able to almost monetize a way of making complete short films that are completely free of any kind of commercial.
Okay, I think that's a really, really interesting subject, certainly for us all to discuss further, and we're going to touch on a little bit more later on, but we're just going to jump ahead to Joe. Joe Whiteley is from If Agency in Manchester. Joe, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
I'm the creative director at the If Agency. We've been going for about 10 years, and we're an insight-led creative agency, so we don't just do content and animations and TV, we do data analytics, brand, and then what we call activation, which can be any of those things, but also social media, etc. as well. So it's quite a broad range of skill sets we have. And we call ourselves a 10-year startup because we still take anything that comes along. Work on brands like Green King, Arriva, Knowsley, and then we have some B2B clients as well, like CPI and things like that. So, yeah.
Just interestingly, I think the subject of an insight-led agency, certainly in this arena at the moment, is really interesting. I think, working for the BBC, there's incredible resource, and there is those people there that put together those facts and figures, and we can fall back on them, which is great. But I think in a very, different arena in an agency world, I don't see as much of it. And I think If Agency and the team at If Agency are kind of at the spearhead of that at the moment. Can you talk a little bit more about that process?
To sort of set the context, what we was finding with a lot of our clients was that they were giving us quite reactive briefs, and then it was hard to measure whether they were right, or it was more based on what people preferred or what they felt. Yet we knew they had lots of data, and when we sort of asked them for the information and the insight, the honest truth was they've got a lot of data, but there's nobody there. There's no one who's got the time to root through it and find out what that tells them. And so they were basically drowning in data. And so we employed a team, effectively. And we've got an insight director, and he helps clients to take that data and turn it into actionable marketing projects. So it may well be that it's customer segmentation, or it might be an attribution project whereby we can work out when you should stop paying out for PPC, for example, when it stops becoming valuable, where the return diminishes. So, and then how it feeds into the creative is there tends to be quite a lot of insight within that we can use, even if it is just understanding the audience better, that we can pull through into the creative briefs, and it just makes it easier for everybody to measure the quality of the work, and we think anyway, certainly the results that we're getting demonstrates that the output as well from a customer experience point of view or from a return on investment point of view seems to be there when we take that approach. So yeah.
And you're going to share a project with us today that you created for Knowsley Safari
right.
Park.
Yeah, yeah.
How did those insights?
Well, there was a lot of
created?
insight that went into that particular project. So we developed the brand idea for Knowsley a few years ago, 4 years ago, I think it was now. And the proposition is all around truly wild encounters. And so their biggest challenge is Chester Zoo. So Chester Zoo, much bigger brand with more money effectively. So we've got a limited budget. We had to find something. So we found the chink, if you like, that we've got vast open spaces. From a customer point of view, people see that as a negative sometimes because they're not guaranteed to see every animal. So we needed to turn that into a positive. And we found that when we delved into the data, that what customers really liked was that it was unexpected, that you just never knew quite what you was going to see at any given time of day, different times a year. So we found that insight, and that's what drove the proposition. We did some customer segmentation, which told us who we were going to talk to. And then we developed a brand idea that was all around adventure. And over the course of a few years, we dipped our toe in TV a little bit with some ads we did for Sky, and then this ad that I'm going to show you was our we're going to do live footage. We're going to go on ITV. It was a real big risk, I guess, and a real first. But the data and the attribution model that we pulled together helped us to understand that it was going to be a success. The first one we ran was 2017 on ITV, and then we're just rerunning this one with a slight tweak for this year because it worked so well last year. So, do you want
Let's
to
have a look.
play it?
Let's have a look.
Adventure Calls, Tiger Trail, now open at Knowsley Safari.
So the animation element of it, which I know a lot of the examples will be pure animation, and we have done those projects, but what I thought was interesting about this one was that without the bee, which is the only aspect of it that was animated, it wouldn't have been possible within the budget. So it was a key aspect of the whole campaign.
Okay, I'm just going to hold you there because budget, we're going to go into that a little bit more detail shortly, but I'm just going to throw over to Jamie. Jamie's from the Animation Gaze down in London, is working on some really great projects at the moment on a smaller scale. I think Jamie, is it fair to say that you're more of a boutique outlet?
Yeah, we're definitely a boutique. So we're a small team. There's sort of 10 of us at one time in the studio. That's led by sort of directors and supporting staff. We essentially work on. So it started with a 2D guy. I'm the 2D guy and a 3D guy, and then it grew into some more 3D people. A VFX guy turned up, and sort of more kind of people around those different skill sets. But we're very sort of creative-led in that sense. And we sort of work with clients on the creative agency side to help like white label, clear label, all that sort of stuff. And then we also work with like clients directly. And it's really interesting to hear what Joe's saying in regards to sort of like having those sort of metrics to work with, because they're so important. So many times that I speak to a marketing director and I'm like, how many website hits are you getting? And they're like, oh, we don't know. You're like, well, how are you doing this? But yeah, we work with some good marketing directors and a range of creative agencies. Okay, we're going to touch on the relationship between the agencies shortly, but you've got something to show us today? Yeah, so we've just gone into our 4th year of business. Woohoo! Still going. And we actually got this in our 1st year. So in our 1st year, we're like, wouldn't it be great if we could do like a TV advert? And we sort of moved into a new studio
in the hope that it's like Wayne's World, like build it and they will come. In the hope that we get work in a little bit. And we got this on the day we moved into that studio. And after we'd hired 2 new people, so that kind of worked out quite nicely. Wouldn't recommend doing that, obviously. It just worked out nice. And this was actually through meeting a company that did radio advertising, and they did some radio advertising for the company's Royal London, and they said, do you want to do the TV advert? And we went like, yeah, sure. Like, give that a go. But yeah, should we have a look at it?
Yeah, let's go.
Funerals are expensive. Your family could spend thousands paying for yours. Take control and help your family pay those final costs with Royal London's guaranteed over 50s life cover from just 13p a day. If you're 50 to 80, you're guaranteed acceptance with no medical questions. And 95% of the time, you'll get less money with Sun Life. Don't leave them with less than they deserve. Buy now at royallondon.com or call their UK team free on 0800 500 3344.
So like the interesting thing with that is it probably, not through our fault, but like it probably took about 2 months to animate back into the client, and it probably took another 2 months just to get all the legal text signed off, which we were like, how is it taking this long? Like it's a pixel too big. But yeah, that was quite interesting.
So Damien, going from Jamien, who's a small boutique, into rhymes.
J2D, yeah.
Got the microphones for it. So going over to Doc 10, and tell us about Doc 10. What's
Doc
going
10,
on?
The Peel Empire, yeah. I set up and ran 422 Post House in Manchester. Set that up in the early 90s, ran it for 20 odd years, sold it to Doc 10. I now run post operations for visual effects, animation, graphics there. So we still work with ad agencies, corporate clients. We also do a lot of kids animation, long form, post finishing, so sound, visual effects, so with Flames, Myers, the whole kit gamut. There's about 15 of us. We bring in freelance talent as and when required. Work a lot with Tim and yourself, obviously. People like Brown Bag, CHF. So a lot of stuff 2D, 3D. We're essentially post guns for hire, audio specialism as well for animation. 50% of the product at the end of the day. So quite a wide range of.
And you've got a reel.
We've got a reel, which is kind of a selection of
let's have
stuff
a look.
We do.
Brilliant. Just before we dive straight in, I just want to introduce Tim Jones. He's the creative director of BBC North, my boss.
It'd be nice.
I'm not going to say anything about it. It'd be nice, yes. If you don't mind, Tim, can you just tell us a little bit about your role and what BBC North is?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Creative North, sorry.
Yeah, I'm creative director at BBC Creative in the North, so we look after all of the editorial content that is, that comes out of the North. So that's sport, kids, learning and charities, so we create all of the marketing for those. And then our London office sort of takes care of everything else. So it's a huge amount of business. Basically, we always describe it as we make everything in between the programmes on the BBC. So that's a lot. It's a lot of content. It's a lot of seconds to fill every day. So, in sort of in our role, we kind of came in just over a year ago. Well, probably about 18 months now, when sort of the North was quite a small proposition, and we were sort of charged with growing it, bringing the right people in, and doing good work really. And thanks to people like Wes and our team and everything, we've sort of hopefully been doing that. So yeah, and I guess from an animation point of view, I mean, we love doing animation. It sort of feels such a great means to tell a story, and sort of always feels like a really pure process whenever you sort of use animation to sort of tell a story, and sort of and build a story and work with really talented people. I always find that there's sort of really great talented people within animation that are just willing to try things and experiment. And I don't know, I've always, whenever I've done an animation, it's always turned out better than I hoped it would. So, which isn't always the case in all other mediums. So no, it's great. And also, I know we'll come onto sort of budgets later, but I just think that there's a lot of clever people out there that know how to get the most out of the pennies on animation.
Just with regards to, just before you show your film, and I know it's an especially brilliant piece of creative, certainly that we've seen this year. I think particularly for me, I think it's quite interesting. How do you inspire a client, or in this case, let's say BBC Sport, if you're the agency, the in-house agency, how do you inspire that client, if it's sport or if it's kids or charities, to your way of thinking? If you want to sell in something particular, what is it? Or is it a process where you give them options and they just pick?
It's hard to answer that entirely, because I think it's different for every job and different to every person that you're dealing with. But I think on something like this, it's about taking them on the journey, and sort of this was a particularly, it wasn't a hard idea to sell, it was a hard process to sell, because we weren't really sure how we were going to do it in the first instance. And to be fair to the BBC and the BBC Sport guys, I don't think we would have got this away in commercial and client world, because I just think that they would have not been willing to go on that journey with us. But because I think we're tied into, we're ultimately part of the marketing team, and we are a team, then that was really easy. But I think the best way to convince anyone to do, like, you just have to sell to them and lie to them if you have to. Fake it till you make it. No, but I think it's true on something like this, is that it's kind of like we weren't really sure how we were going to do it, so we just had to appear very confident and get them to.
Well, I think that's quite an interesting point, because we're going to throw to the animation companies in a second, because there's obviously, we've not seen it yet, but there's a creative ambition there. You want to make something.
Well, I think ultimately when we sold, I think, I'm trying to think back to the process, but I know we were very close on making another idea, and it was a live action shoot and all of that. And I think what's brilliant about animation, and particularly on things so it's a World Cup trail we're going to show, is that it allows you to build a world as well, and sort of that, and it's not just about that 60 seconds of film. It's like it encompassed everything, and it allowed us to build a world that I think animation allows you to do, which you can't really do in live action. And our other route, whilst would have made a fantastic 60-second film, wouldn't have given us that really deep, rich film that we would have got with this.
Let's have a look. Let's roll the film.
Oczy strasznie, oczy sztucznie.
He's going to be out of the final.
Surely that was it. Czarnie, oczy strasznie. That's a score for Germany. I prekrasnie, tak lubię ja was, tak boję ja was. увидел вас, я не в добрый шаг. Как люблю я вас.
Now, to produce that film, it wasn't any mean feat, and that is not a big comped thing on After Effects. Every frame, am I right in saying, has been hand-stitched by a machine, and they were all shot and filmed and
yeah. So I mean,
pieced
that was
together.
part of the reason we wanted to do it, and to get all credit to the marketing teams. Part of the reason they wanted to do it was the sort of endeavour of it that really got them excited and sort of engaged with it. So yeah, so apart from the live action bits that sort of top and tail it, it's 608 frames or something like that of individually embroidered tapestry that was. First of all, we did a 2D animation, and actually it was a 2D animation that took the most time because we knew once that was created that it was locked, that we wouldn't be able to change it. So we had to make sure that was right, and everyone was happy with it and accepted that it wasn't going to change. And then they took that 2D animation, and the London Embroidery Company, who are an incredible company down in London that do embroidery, funny enough, took each frame of that 2D animation, so 12.5 frames per second, and digitised each one and decided which direction the stitching was going to go, how thick the stitching was going to be. Had way more conversations I thought I'd ever have in my life about stitch density and stitch directions. And then each frame was then machine embroidered. They're about A5 each one, and each of those frames were then photographed on like a tabletop, like just still, and then they were pieced together in again as sort of I guess finally like a stop motion. That was what was really great about it. Was like it was 2D animation that became physical embroidery that became a stop motion film that was all pieced together.
I just think it's absolutely incredible what you achieve with that. But I think I can just throw back to the animation producers here. So Tim's come up with this amazing idea. Right,
then it wasn't. I mean, I was a creative director on it. I have to give the other creators their due on it. I mean, it wouldn't have been as good without me. It was definitely someone else's idea.
And he walks into your door and he's already inspired the client. The client's like, OMG, we're going to get this most amazing piece of creative. You've never seen the likes of it before. Yeah. You guys pick up the phone and are like, yeah, come in. Let's have the conversation. Is there a process of kind of re-inspiring the creative director? Is there a process of kind of making them realise that there's only this amount of money and we can only make that? There's £10, but you want £100,000 worth of animation. Is that a thing? Is it a regular occurrence?
Yes.
Every job.
Why is that no surprise?
Yeah. I mean, something like that is obviously kudos, and everybody would love to work on a project like that. Most of life is kind of more general day-to-day stuff. So when something like that comes along, you want to be part of it, don't you? And I'm sure there was a reasonable budget on that, but as ever, it probably doesn't go as far as it should. And that's it.
They should have been.
But that's part of the polarized thing of animation now. There is, there is a very top-end set, and there is a very man and his Mac in his bedroom set, and the in-between is kind of a difficult land to live in a lot of the time.
What I liked about sort of ultimately how that project came off is that it was only made possible by one man in his bedroom in the end. So luckily we happened to find a music video by a guy called, like the director of that piece was a guy called Nikos Livsey, who is rep by Blink, but it was only because he had made a music video himself in his bedroom for his band that was made from sort of panels of embroidery. It was a bit more basic because it had to be, because he basically made it by himself with one machine over the course of I think about 18 months. But if we hadn't found that guy, I'm not sure if but like I say, that's what I like about animation is like if it's like $5,000 or what or 50 grand or whatever it is, it's the person that you find to make it that that always brings it to life. It's not quite the same when you're filming something. You know, you still get a beautiful product, and you go through similar process. But I think when you find someone like that, or whoever it is, or wherever it is, and they always add, you know, that film would not have been that film without that one guy.
That's lovely.
I was going to say, when we brief projects out, I feel like a bit of an imposter because we don't create the content. We come up with the idea and then we brief it to you guys, and you make the magic, so to speak. But what I find quite difficult is that when you sell an idea, or when you come up with an idea, you've got a vision in your mind of what it's going to look like in the end, and trying to make sure you get the most out of the animators and ultimately the illustrators that are all involved in that is allowing enough creative freedom for you to get the best out of that talent, but still living up to the vision that you've got. And it's I find that quite difficult. I don't know whether you have the same thing. When you brief in somebody and you're like, this is the vision, but I do want you to add your... And then sometimes I come back and go, ooh, I wasn't expecting. Sometimes it's amazing. Sometimes the story's taken on a different... And it's quite a difficult balance, I find.
I think that's a good point. It's all about the vision. Because I think if someone comes to you with an amazing idea, they know exactly what they want, and it's a very strong idea, and then everyone kind of buys into it, and then it's a lot more fluid process, where if it's a slightly vague idea and no one's quite sure, and it's kind of been sold in when it's not quite kind of complete, then that makes it a lot trickier project, and also makes it trickier from a cost position as well, because you're like, how many iterations of this are we going to get through before we work out what we're actually making? So it's when, like for example with that project, when it's such a simple but beautiful idea, then you find a way of making it with the budget.
But it's also concerning sometimes when creators have sold into a client an idea, and it's a marvellous idea, the client's gone for it, and it totally just doesn't bear any relevance to the budget that they come with. So it's, I'd always...
Is that quite common?
Reasonably, yeah.
I have been guilty of doing that.
And I just always encourage agencies, to speak to production people.
I think it's very true of animation for sure, because I think when you're doing a shoot, then you can kind of add up this many people on set for this many days. But also it's again, that's kind of the beauty of animation, is that I know we've worked with you guys and you guys as well. It's kind of like when you do have that. I guess it depends on who you're working with and who you're ultimately is buying that. But again, that film and things we've made with you guys evolves from, all right, this was our intention at the outset, but actually sometimes that budget restriction can take it into a whole other world.
I think it's about
that you weren't expecting, and can be even better.
And I think it comes down to communication, because if you all get the purpose of it, you can then suggest, well, if we change this and this, we can still meet the original purpose, but bring it in on budget.
Exactly.
Where if you don't, if agency says, here's a brief, you don't need to know about why we're doing it or anything, just make that, then it's a lot harder to know what parameters you're working within, so you're not sure what corners you can cut.
I agree with that. I think there's always this thing where people get a bit carried away and go like it, they're trying to sort of create this thing, but there's no real value to some of the things that they want on the screen. You know what I mean? They're just like, they just want it to look pretty for the reason of it, for pretty's sake. And it's like, yeah, but you just said the word crowd, and that means like an extra £100,000 on the budget. Do we need a crowd in this, or can it just be a dark kind of like, do you know what I mean, area?
Joe, if you don't mind me saying, I mean, you often work direct with clients as well, so you're almost kind of cutting out the middleman, the agency. How do you find that? Does it work better than working with an agency? Have you got different experiences there?
It depends on the agency, but I kind of feel like sometimes it's great because you get to speak to the client directly. The danger is that you've got to sort of, I was talking to you about, you've got to sort of like future-proof that work, because they might go like, wow, it's so pretty. And it's like, yeah, but you need to make sure that has then a marketing person behind it that's getting the results from it to make sure that work actually works for the client, if you know what I mean. So that's the sort of different element on that. I think it usually has its pros. They're usually a bit more sort of flexible. They're promising less to the actual client. There's always that sort of thing where feedback will get really convoluted. Like someone will say something up here, it'll go to the sort of agency. If you don't get to sort of like work with the client as well, and then you've got this like, why have you said that? Like that can be really sort of tricky. But I guess you're always just trying to find that balance of trying to make sure that it's fit for purpose, but also your studio's kind of reputation is also with that as well. It's like visually kind of as high as it can be, you know what I mean? But then, well, actually no, we'll save the budgets for a bit.
Well, we can move on to budgets.
We need more budgets.
Generally need more cash.
Of working sometimes with direct to clients, it sometimes can be tricky because a lot of time it's done to kind of cut the agency out to save budget, which means there's not the experience there. So we've sometimes done projects before direct to the client, and then you finish a project and then the phone rings and they say, turns out things called ClearCast we need to do, and it turns out the scripts, we haven't checked it. And we're like, right, okay. And there's and it can cost a lot more because they just don't know the process.
Creep. Yeah. I mean, we find that quite often working within BBC Creative. You'll find that you're making one version, and then ultimately there's actually 20 versions of something that you're making, and that kind of impacts back on the animation company, and everybody's scrabbling around for more budget.
I always find it's often not the start of the process is the problem, it's the end of the process.
The final delivery. But just before we jump ahead to the final kind of delivery, I think, Tom, what are the kind of major challenges from your perspective in producing, let's say, I think we've already touched on, but series work as opposed to advert or creative? Yeah,
I mean, they're two different beasts, because like on a series, you might have, say, kind of 6,000 shots and a team of 50 people working on it, whereas for a commercial, it's challenging for a different way, that it's generally a lot more kind of frenetic, because you've got a very condensed timescale where you might have a year and a half to animate a 52 episode series. You might have 6 weeks to make a commercial. And in that time, you have to kind of design it and look at it and animate it and finish it and do the sound. So and in that time, the idea will constantly be evolving, because no one kind of knows what they're making until they start seeing kind of storyboards and stuff. So because it's worked so quickly, it's never fully kind of baked at any one time. Whereas on a series, you make one episode, you're like, yeah, that's it. Let's roll that out for the other 50. So there's just huge different challenges in each.
It's quite an unknown, isn't it? Going into the unknown.
It's just the rate you have to get up to speed is crazy quick in commercials. Then you blink and it's finished, you're on to the next one.
We did touch on before about this incredible kind of initiative that you set up in studio to encourage animators to make a film. So that's a twice a year thing that you do.
Yeah, and again, that's very much to kind of push the studio forward, because when you make commercials, you can very easily get kind of pigeonholed into that style, because obviously an agency will see your reel and say, okay, they can do that style, we'll ask them to do that style, which we all do when we look at show reels. So our shorts are generally to push past that and break out of that mold. So we always try and set a brief which pushes us out of our kind of creative comfort zone to do new ones, like our short last year, Mamoon, which was kind of projecting characters onto miniature polystyrene sets and things like that. So it's just trying to push the studio to keep moving and not stay kind of complacent with what we're doing.
And do you have a preference between series or commercial?
Well, I work in commercials. So, I think it takes... No, it's different. I mean, some people just love doing one thing and spending ages doing it. Like if you're working on a series, you can just set that kind of vision and perfect that one kind of role if you're an animator. Where if you're on commercials and you like constantly doing different things, you can then, in commercials, you can do that because you're working on different projects almost every day. So it's different mindsets.
Yeah. And just to throw back over to Joe, when you're selling into a client, I mean, do you always have a preference, or does a client specifically say straight up, listen, I want an animation to say X, Y, and Z, or is it something that you're thinking about and you think, what makes animation so special, I suppose? And
it kind of depends on the brief and probably on the budget, on the brand. So with Knowsley, since everyone's seen that one, the ads that we did for the first 2 years were Sky ads, and the limitation was it had to be animated because we didn't have the budget to film anything. So with a proposition like Truly Wild Encounters, it makes it very, very difficult. So our vision was always to go for live footage, so you can truly when with the ad that I've just shown you, the brief was, we need footage on this. We're going to put more budget behind it, but you're going to have to make it work really, really hard. So on that occasion, on both of those occasions, it was directed by what we had available to us, if you like. Whereas other projects, we'll be given a brief and we go away and work out how we can tell that story. And sometimes it might be through animation, just because. So, for example, we did something for Robert's Bakery, and they needed to launch a range of products, branded products, for a new biscuit brand. And so we needed photographic biscuits, but there was no way we could film and create a set. So we animated it. We animated the story for that one. And that was a practical thing, but also it was aimed at children, the majority of the products. So it was really friendly. It worked for that sort of tone of voice that we were trying to create. So yeah, it's horses for courses, really. I don't think I've ever been given a brief where you absolutely have to do that without any consideration of anything else.
At what point do you start considering animation companies? Because obviously we're sat in a room with millions of animators now. You know, everyone's producing animation, probably more long format than we're used to, especially you know, with the talent on the table. So, at what point do you think, right, let's get out there? Who's in Manchester? Is it a Manchester thing, or are you happy to go further? Is it driven by budget?
Yeah, I mean.
Here's my
There's
card,
a lot of
by the
questions
way.
there. We've worked together before, I know you. Right, there was a lot of questions there. So when do you start looking? What we tend to do is we will come up with the idea, and then we get a vision for the story that we want to tell, and then we start trying to think about what kind of animation style, if it is animation, what kind of animation style would bring that to life, and we would find references, and then we would try and find somebody that was able to, like you say, you look at show reels, you look at, you call, you know, a friend of a friend of a friend who calls a friend, and eventually you find someone. Also, we've spoken to production teams and said, look, we want to make this. Can you help us find the right talent? And they've gone out and found it for us because they tend to do it all the time. And, you know, animation is a relatively speaking, a small part of what we do. So we don't have lots of animators on our books, so to speak. So the Little Treats one that I was talking about before for Roberts, we spoke to a production company and they found us a number of different individuals and a couple of companies. We had a look at the show reels, narrowed it down to a couple, and then we spoke to them direct, got a feel for them, because you've got to work with them for quite a while as well. So you've got to feel like they're on the same wavelength, and that you can, you know, they've got the flexibility to do it and all the rest of it. Mm-hmm. So it's quite intense trying to find the right person. It's a big commitment, particularly if it's an individual, because it's not like they've got a big team of people around them. You know, to help if something's not working, or so yeah, it's a tricky one, that, I'll be honest.
So just with that in mind, I mean, animation production obviously is quite big in Manchester, and everyone's making series or adverts in one shape or form, post-producing, etc. And of course, Jamie's joining us from London. There's loads of work in London, right? It's where everyone should be.
A little bit, yeah. Don't come down, like.
What's the future for this thing, for this kind of arena of production? Is there enough work to sustain us all, do you think?
Certainly hope so. I mean, Manchester, as you say, has got a very rich heritage, you know, back from, you know, Mark Hall and, you know, Brian Cosgrove in the very, very early 70s, you know. It's grown and it is a centre of excellence. So, you know, I've been in post 30 years, and you know, there has been always a strong animation community, and I can't see that changing, really. You know, there's still a lot of investment, you know, from CBBS, you know, sort of independents.
Just to touch on a slightly different point, we spoke about it just off screen before, Tom. We were saying that, you know, creating animated adverts, we're seeing loads of them at the moment, you know, particularly for Christmas. Yeah. Has it had its time? Is this Christmas the last Christmas?
I think, you know, over the years you've seen the kind of the popularity of animation from an agency perspective kind of go up and down. There's always trends, different styles and things. I was chatting to one agency not long ago, and they were saying it's slightly not as much on the up at the moment, and one of the reasons is because of the kind of the wanting to and trying as an agency and world to be more kind of inclusive and really show how you're representing lots of kind of minorities and stuff. And that's ironically one of the reasons animation became successful is because you can completely avoid that by making all of your characters blue. But now that doesn't cut it because the companies want to show that diverse audience, and they can do that very well in the film by casting people from different ethnicities. And animation, you can't, and you can't animate that as easily. That's why it's kind of it's easier to do by casting people rather than just picking a few random skin colours. Yeah. That's what one agency person told me.
Do you think that's the future of casting in animation for the future, whether it's going to sustain itself or not?
I think animation will never go anywhere. It allows you to do so much that you can't do on film, which is one of the reasons why it's so hard sometimes, is because you're starting with a complete blank slate and you're not limited by anything.
But you can create a character, can't you? And it doesn't have to be real, so you can tell a story more succinctly quite often with illustration and animation, because you create a world around it. And what I've also found is it's in a lot of cases it's easier to edit, and so take an idea and use lots of different, because once the assets are created, cutting them slightly differently can tell slightly different stories, and you can use them for, particularly with the need for social content as well, that tends to be anyway a lot shorter, so you can reuse those assets. So I find the flexibility there really helps. It's quite difficult when you're filming to retake and move everything around and retake again, or you crop half the story off. I've seen people do that.
You don't have to license for online and either with cast.
Well, I think that's quite an important point. Licensing for online, which is becoming such a big thing at the moment, particularly for
I think it's just
talent.
I think it's like from our example, I think there's some just really interesting opportunities, and I think where animation and the worlds cross. So this year's Bake Off trail as well, which is we're at Promax on Friday, and World Cup and Bake Off didn't pick up anything in the animation category, because I think people see don't see animation unless it's a cartoon. But I think that's where the really exciting things are, is where those two worlds cross over. And like you're saying, I just think there's so much the scope that you can create with animation and the stories you can tell, and I just think it's a really collaborative arena as well.
Which there's reasons sometimes agencies don't like going near it because of that, because there's so much you can do. It can be a bit scary, and you need such a good trust with who you're working with to make sure that when your job's on the line.
And I think we benefit from being at the BBC with the amount of projects we get to do, because I think there's a willingness to experiment and try things a little bit more. Like saying with the World Cup, I'm not sure I'd probably work with a commercial client that perhaps would have risked doing that or doing that sort of thing. Or there was conversations even then, even with our production teams, like, well, we're gonna find a filter for this, or we'll find an animator that can just create this world all within the computer, and it's like, well, that's kind of not the point of it. And I think it's the story behind it that made it as much as the final product. So,
to the other guys, do you see there's like a bit of a trend with people being a bit scared of development, or trying to talk a client into sort of like, so do you want to give us some money to have a go at some stuff until it works out from a visual perspective, which is kind of what you're saying in some regards, because otherwise you're just going, here's some stuff that's worked before, do you want to go down one of these styles, or should we do something that's really uniquely kind of like challenging the norm or representing your brand? And I think the times that we've done that, the budgets haven't been great, so we've just done it because we want to do it.
You have to take the hit.
Exactly, and then it's been great, and it's like, oh, I didn't really get paid for that. Do you find that's a common thing throughout?
What, in terms of development
Yeah.
stuff? Well, we never like, it's a bit weird, we don't like really being paid to do pitches because you feel like you're then handing over, you're buying an idea, and it's like we want to make the thing, we don't just want to be paid for an idea. So we tend to just pitch for free, and then sometimes it does take a bit of time to cross that line, but that's our decision.
Yeah. I mean, when we presented the Knowsley ad, and I've presented 3 concepts, and the one that went ahead was certainly the most complex. And the client did say, "We love it, but can you do it?" She was meaning she wasn't testing our ability. It was because she knew the limited budget. And I was just honest and said, "I don't know, but I'll give it a good go." And because I've got such a good relationship with her, she trusted that we would make it work, and we did. And so, yeah, it was quite a challenge, and I did feel sick for about 3 or 4 weeks, because of course because we worked on that one. We had a production team who was looking after the video production. We had a drone, animals, families, kids, and animation. It was just like, are you mental? And yes, we was mental, but it was really, really good fun. I did feel really ill. Oh, weather. That was the other thing, weather. It's just like, you can't, all these things that you just couldn't control on a very, very limited budget. But it was really good fun doing it. And then the bee itself, we had this vision of this cute little buzzing bumblebee, which was lovely little idea. And the client, who knows, obviously, nature, and they wanted a species that was natural to the Knowsley environment. So they sent us this reference, and it was a bee, but it looked like a wasp. So I'm looking at the average 4-year-old who's watching this TV ad, thinking, I'm not going there, I don't want to go, I'm petrified. So it was a really tricky balance. So from an animator's point of view, worse, because these poor animators are going, well, we kind of want it to look cute, but this is the reference, and I'm not really sure how that was complex. And I think we got just about there with the native bee without frightening anyone who ever wished to explore wildlife. So yeah, it was a interesting challenge. But in answer to the question of, are clients brave enough? Yes, I would say they are.
There's also, I think, as Tim was just about to say, there's that, it does allow that flexibility there as well, because you're not reliant on a shoot going well, that you can change it, to an extent right up to delivery. So which does allow...
I'm going to quote you on that.
To an extent. I'll underline that word. So that does allow more kind of freedom. So there's less pressure on that shoot day for it all to go right.
You don't have to worry about the weather so much. But there are other challenges with that. So I would be very, very nervous of saying to a client, you can change things. What I'm actually saying from an agency point of view, coming back to whoever asked, was talking about do we cut the agency out? From an agency point of view, saying to a client, you can change it till the last minute is the last thing I would say, because it will happen. And, well, you said we could change it. It's like, yeah, but we've finished now. Yeah. Your fish can't be a pig. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
So you can't, there is a bit of a balancing act with what can and can't change, and there has to be a cut-off point, particularly when you work into limited budgets. But... yeah.
Okay, well, listen, I think it's been really informative. I think we're all in agreement that animation's here to stay.
Absolutely.
Thank God for that.
Yeah,
right. I'm just going to very quickly throw it over to the floor. If there was any questions, now's your time to shout up. Brilliant. No questions?
Covered it all.
You can ask. Okay, brilliant. So just a massive thank you to our panel today. It's been great having you here, Thanks for agreeing to come along. It's been really insightful. Thank you very much.